Hello and welcome to Seven. I'm your principal, your founder, and your host with the most, Matthew Mills. And welcome to the latest in our Seven lecture series. And while there's no test at the end, which is great, there's also no prizes for guessing what this one's about. Now, you can't help but have noticed that prices of just about everything are going up astronomically. And in fact, the headline rate of inflation, which just means the rate at which prices go up, topped around 10% for some items, maybe a little bit more in some cases, in the last month or so. And I felt that we really needed to say a few words about that. Now, just to put this into some kind of context, inflation typically runs at something around 3%. So the rates we're experiencing now, prices are going up 3-4 times faster than they would do normally, which is obviously going to hurt you in your back pocket. Now, don't panic when you see this slide. I'm not expecting the price increases to go up by 72%, but what I do want to introduce you to is a really fundamentally important rule for your financial planning called the rule of 72. Because if you divide 72 by the rate of inflation, it tells you how many years prices will take to double, how many times they will double. Similarly, if you divide 72 by the rate of interest you're getting on your investments, it tells you how many years your investments will take to double. So if we divide 72 by 3, which is the traditional rate of inflation, then the answer is about 24-ish. And what that tells us is that on average, usually, prices will tend to double of goods and services every sort of 24 to 25 years, every quarter of a century or so. So a nice steady increase in prices. However, if inflation is running at 10%, which it kind of is at the moment, and for some things a little bit higher, then prices will tend to double every 7 years or so, which is really, really going to hurt, and you're really going to notice it in your household budget and its impact on what you've got left to spend at the end of the month. Now, why prices go up is really, really complicated. It's got lots of different factors involved. And I thought this might be a way to try and explain it, which might make things a little bit simpler. And what you're looking at is a circuit diagram for a home heating system. It's called basically a system, and it's a kind of thought that we can apply to economies and things that change in economies to help us understand them. So what you've got here is you've got a desired temperature that you set your thermostat to, and that signal is compared with the temperature in your home. And if the temperature in your home is lower than you desire, it switches the heater on. And if the temperature in your home is higher than your desired temperature, then it switches the heater off. So nice, simple, what we call feedback loop. So if we apply the same kind of thinking to the economy, then rather than being a thermostat, you've got sort of demand for stuff, things that you want to buy, and then you've also got the amount of stuff. You can tweak those up or down. Then the companies that make stuff will compare the demand versus the amount of stuff that's available, and that will help them set a price for stuff. That then affects the affordability of stuff against household budgets. And that affordability feeds back into sales of stuff, which then companies compare with the amount of stuff they're making and demand for stuff to change the prices. So there's a constant feedback loop between how much stuff we demand, how much stuff companies make, and the affordability of household budgets. And what's pretty much going on at the moment is that the price of stuff is going up. And the big question is, what's going on here in this feedback loop in our economy to change the price of stuff? Okay, well, the price of stuff didn't just suddenly change out of the blue. The price of stuff, inflation, changed because of a number of things that have happened over time. Now, this is a gross simplification, but it maybe just helps explain how a number of things happen over time, feed back into the economy over time. So go right back to the left-hand side of this diagram. Let's go back to the credit crunch, if you can remember back that far, 2007. All the banks ran out of money, and the Bank of England started printing money. It's called quantitative easing. And what that basically does, if you print more money, the value of each bit of money is worth less. One of the effects it has is to reduce interest rates, so it makes affording loans more effective. But the buying power of money goes down, and that tends to increase inflation. So if the value of each pound note has gone down, if you remember pound notes as well, shows how old I am, but if the value of each pound note goes down, it buys less stuff, or effectively the price goes up. It pushes inflation up. Then we get around to 2019 and the global pandemic, because of course we couldn't make things too easy, could we? And effectively we were all paid to stay at home, not producing stuff, not working in companies producing stuff. So we were accumulating money. We had more and more money. In fact, people saved about 5 times more than they would normally save because there was nothing to spend your money on. And we weren't making any stuff. So then what happens is when COVID starts to relax and we're allowed to go out, we've got all this pent up demand for stuff, all this stuff we want to go and buy. And we've got the money to go and do it. So we race out to the high street to go and spend all this money. But nobody's been producing stuff. So there's less stuff available. So there's the demand that drives prices up for more scarce stuff, which lumps on top of what the BOE did, the Bank of England, in printing more money. Then you come round to the effect of Brexit in 2020, where we finally got Brexit done, and the supply of stuff, because when you make stuff, usually there's lots of bits of stuff you get from all over the world, you mix them up, whatever it's going to be, tellies, teddy bears, foodstuffs, what have you. The supply of stuff getting into the country is bogged down by basic bureaucratic red tape at the borders. So you've got less stuff being made, or being made more slowly, even though the demand for stuff is there. So that will tend to push prices up as well. Then we get to the unfortunate things going on in Ukraine. I don't want to denigrate any of the suffering that's going on there, but clinically, in a cold, objective way, one of the things that has happened is a lot of the fuel for Europe, about 30% of it in terms of oil for petrol and diesel and gas, there's about 30% that we get from Russia, or we did get from Russia, and that started to dry up a little bit. Now, what that does is it means there's less fuel available, which tends to put its price up. And that's really important because you've got to get stuff across the borders in Europe into factories and companies that make stuff, and it becomes more expensive to do it. Then you've got to put the machinery that makes stuff, and you've got to put the energy into doing that, and that fuel prices push up the cost of production. They also put up the cost of transporting those goods to supermarkets. I won't mention any of those because for copyright reasons. But it pushed up the cost of getting things into shops. So fuel being less available pushes up the cost of producing stuff, and there's been less stuff in the shops because of Brexit and supply chain problems. There's been less stuff because we haven't been actually in companies producing stuff, but the demand for stuff has gone up because we've been sitting at home collecting money from our furloughs, and the buying power of the money we've been collecting has gone down as well. But surely you're thinking people are completely rational and we would find a way to deal with this in a thoroughly sensible and British stiff upper lip kind of way. And that would be wrong. A couple of examples. So on the basis of rumours of fuel shortages, just rumours, we've had hour-long tailbacks of people filling up their cars, but not thinking about, well, if I fill my car up, then the person who produces stuff in a company can't get to work to produce stuff. So it's just going to put prices up even more. So there's demand at the pump, which is also reflecting in demand and inflationary pressure going up as well. Then you've got a brilliant example. This is my absolute favourite. You probably shouldn't advertise, but it's a bit like there. So this is during the pandemic, where rational, sensible people stored up to stay at home during the lockdown, not thinking that basically if the people who fix water pipes and electricity supplies basically can't get to work, then won't do you much good anyway. But they sensibly stored up in beer. There's nothing that beer can't do. But all over the country, supermarkets still had a certain type of beer with a certain word not dissimilar to coronavirus. And the very sensible, rational, highly intelligent British public didn't buy it. So you can see that, much as we said it in our last Midsummer Musings lecture, what we have to overlay on a very sensible explanation of what's happening with inflation, and we can see how it's built up over time, is the amplifying effect of human behaviour, which is largely driven by emotion and often very, very irrational. Now, of course, if inflation keeps going up at something like 10% a year or even more, then obviously you can see that with the way prices will go up, we could be in all sorts of trouble. So this is something we really need to start panicking about. Well, we do want prices to go up, and it does happen on a regular basis. We want them to go up a nice, sensible, reasonable pace. So that's good for companies making profit and paying our salaries to work in. But what do we expect to actually happen in inflation in the near term? And I think there's probably good reasons to think that inflation will be dialed down over the next year or so. So there are 4 points here, and I'll just quickly whip through them, and they relate to the previous slide. So dialing down inflation, the Bank of England is printing less money. Plus, they're also raising interest rates. So we'll all have less money in our back pocket, and items in the shops will become less affordable. Companies will sell less, and that will tend to drive prices down. Also, that furlough money is going to dry up. Once you've spent your savings, then that money's all gone, and that will tend to reduce demand, and that will dial down inflation. Border bureaucracy is definitely improving as the relationships with Europe sort of get sorted out, and supply chain issues are starting to sort this out. So the supply of the raw materials to create goods is becoming more streamlined, and there's less friction in it, and that's going to tend to increase the ease of production, reduce the cost of production, and supply demand more effectively. Plus, we also can see all over Europe, including the UK, our leaders going off trying to find alternative fuel suppliers to replace those that we would otherwise get from Russia. And that won't happen overnight, but that over the course of the next few months, 6 months or so, that will tend to happen. And these four things taken together will tend to dial down inflation, and I think we might reasonably expect it to level out. So prices might stay at the kind of level they've achieved, but the rate at which they will go up might come back to something a little bit more normal over the next 12 months or so. As we said, the inflation is a normal function of markets, so and it tends to eat away at the buying power of your money. It tends to make things more unaffordable as we go into the future. So is there a way actually to beat inflation? You bet your bum. And that's basically to invest in stocks and shares in the stock markets. Now, in the longer term, stocks and shares in most major markets will tend to deliver something like 7 to 8% above inflation. So they'll tend to beat inflation in the longer term. Not in the short term, because there is volatility, as you can see on this slide here, and past performance is not a guarantee of the future, although it does tend to underlie future trends. But over a meaningful period, 5 to 10 years, investment in stock markets will tend to outperform inflation and outpace prices by about 7 to 8%. So investing in the longer term is the way to do so. And again, if we apply the rule of 72, which I know is burned on your memory now. So as you remember, if you divide 72 by the rate of interest or the return you're getting in an investment, then it tells you how many years your money takes to double. And you'll remember that if you divide 72 by 3, which is the average percentage rate of inflation, prices tend to double every 25 years or so. If you divide 72 by 7, which might be the sort of the return you might get on from a balanced portfolio, then your money will tend to double in value every 10 years or so. So every time prices have gone up or doubled, which takes about 25 years, your investments would have doubled 2.5 times. And you've massively increased the buying power of your money, and you will have soundly whipped inflation. So there you go, end of our latest lecture. And what have we learned? Well, price inflation is complicated, but one of the ways you can understand it is like a feedback loop or a heating systems diagram with different forces dialing up and dialing down inflation and the price of goods. That all said, when you actually look at it logically, over time, since about 2007 or so, there have been pressures that have been driving up inflation, which have been adding together over time, a sequence of unfortunate events, we might say. But those pressures driving up inflation are very much likely to ease over the next 6 months or so, and we might expect inflation to come back to a normal rate, albeit that prices may stay at an elevated level as a result of what's been happening now. That all said, over longer time horizons, over meaningful time horizons, if you were thinking about your pension or your income from investments over a period of decades, the only way to beat inflation is through investments in stocks and shares. This is the only asset that consistently beats inflation in the longer term. And there you go. Before you can say quantitative easing, we arrive at the end of a SE7EN lecture. Obviously intended to inform, to educate, and to entertain, and absolutely in no way, shape, or form does this constitute advice. But hopefully there have been a few useful bits in here, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again really soon. Take care. Bye-bye.